Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome to this second WayWORD Festival. It's lovely to see you. I'm Helen Lynch. I'm just going to do a tiny bit of housekeeping at the beginning, and then I'm going to hand you over to Faridah and May. It's lovely to have you here in virtual Aberdeen this evening, together with a really lovely bunch of young people. I helped to curate and put together this festival program, which is brought to you by the Word Centre at the University of Aberdeen and kindly funded by the University of Aberdeen and Creative Scotland. This particular event is also supported by the University of Aberdeen BAME Forum and the English Literature Society. We are very, very happy to have Leslie Creera, our wonderful BSL interpreter, with us this evening, and you should be able to see her throughout the event. And we also have live captions tonight. So if you want to enable the live captions, you can use the CC live transcript button. Just click on that in your Zoom toolbar and you should be able to see those. So yeah, without further ado, really, after that bit of housekeeping, I'm going to hand you over to May Diansangu. May is one of our all-time favorite WayWORD chairs. She's an activist and a spoken word artist, as well as co-founder of the Northeast Hysteria, Women and Non-Binary Performance Platform. So she's our excellent chair for this evening. So I just hope you have a lovely time hearing about Faridah's book and about many other things. And I'm going to hand you over to her now. So have a lovely evening.
Evening, everyone. And thank you, Helen, for that lovely introduction there. Yeah, here we are, the first day of the WayWORD Book Festival. It's lovely to be back, and I think we're going to have a really great conversation this evening with my wonderful guest. It's an absolute pleasure to have Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé, who is an instant New York Times and international best-selling author of Ace of Spades, which we'll be discussing, hopefully with no spoilers, because if some of you haven't read it, we don't want to ruin what's going on for you. Faridah is an avid tea drinker, a collector of strange mugs, and a recent graduate from Aberdeen University, where she studied English literature. When she isn't spinning dark tales, Faridah can be found examining the deeper meanings in Disney Channel original movies, which I think is a very noble pursuit indeed. How are you, Faridah? Thanks so much for joining us this evening.
I'm fine. How are you?
Great. I'm very excited to be here and feeling very festive. As we've discussed, Faridah is not taking down her Christmas tree, which I love. I love the festivity of it all. So I have your book here, and I must say I was going through a bit of a reading drought when I picked this up, and honestly I think I maybe read it in like within 24 hours. It's such a compulsive read. And I really get what all the hype is about. So yeah, congratulations first of all on all your success. It's truly well deserved. One thing I loved just straight away on the first page is your dedication. For all the Black kids drowning in the sunken place, desperately trying to claw their way out, this book is for you. And that is obviously a reference to Jordan Peele's Get Out. But maybe for those of us who haven't seen the film, I'm just wondering if you could kind of explain what the sunken place is and kind of what that dedication means.
Yeah, so obviously in Get Out, a bit of a spoiler, but there's this place called the sunken place, and it's kind of where people are sent, specifically Black people are sent to kind of like reside there, like powerless, while a white person takes over their body. And it was such a interesting concept that like Jordan Peele came up with, but also I think it really changed the way we discussed kind of internalized racism, and it gave a kind of a word to this phenomenon that was I guess more colloquial. So yeah, that's kind of what it is, just kind of internalized racism and just struggling and feeling powerless. And so growing up, I always felt that way. And I slowly started to come out of it when I was like 17, 18. And it's a very, very sad and dark place, and that's how it's depicted in the movie. And so I just wanted to dedicate the book to people that feel the same way, especially teenagers and young adults that are kind of in that space mentally and are trying to look for ways to kind of get out of that space and like become healthier and see them like relationships with their race as more healthy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what struck a chord with me reading that dedication, it's kind of one of those, if you know, you know. So if you're a Black person and you read that, and you know, if you watch the film and you hear what you're speaking about, it's instantly recognizable. And sadly, it is quite a universal experience that we kind of share as Black folk. And I'm wondering how you envisioned your book in particular being something that could help these Black kids that kind of find themselves in that really dark place.
Because I think I was writing it for myself. I was kind of writing it for people that were also going through the same thing as what I was going through. And so while it was like self-therapy for me, I thought it would also, because I was like, you know, using my real experiences, I think I was hoping it would help people in the same way it was helping me while writing.
I love that. I love how you were writing for yourself first. That's really beautifully put. It's like, you know, it's like a gift for you. And, you know, now it's become this, you know, bestseller. So many people can share in that that gift. I think that's really important. I mean, I love the characters in the book. And I think also there was a lot I could identify with. Obviously, the world you've created is quite far away from, I'm sure, what you're used to, and definitely what I'm used to. And I love Chiamaka. I thought she was great. And, you know, when we're first introduced to her, we understand that she, you know, she's the queen bee. She understands school as being this hierarchy that you've got to kind of, she says you have to kill or be killed. And I just thought that was interesting. That was kind of her personal motto. And it kind of made me think, what does that mean for, you know, a young Black woman from an early age thinking it's kill or be killed, and that's how she needs to get ahead? I'm wondering if you could kind of speak on that a bit.
Yeah, I feel like just generally the mean girl kind of character in like movies and like books, they're kind of like demonized and seen as like one-dimensional, but I feel like they're very like layered people, and there's a lot more going on. Usually it's a defense mechanism, and usually these mean girls are like white people, so people find them a lot more likable. So with Chiamaka, I wanted to create someone that wasn't like pandering to like what white people wanted a Black girl to be like. And I kind of made her unlikable, but also I wanted to explore the things that Black girls go through from a young age, and show how it can manifest into this like very defensive character. And I feel like while I was writing it, I wasn't expecting people to like her, because it wasn't really my, it wasn't really like what I was trying to go for. I was just trying to make her more like human. But like, because I think I was kind of like breaking down why someone might react this way to the world. People could see more of like how we might dehumanize these type of characters, or even these type of people in real life. And as a Black girl in like the world, people try to like adultify you from a young age, or they like paint you as angry, but really there's a lot of justification for that anger. And I wanted to kind of showcase that.
Yeah, and I think you did that perfectly, and you really achieved what you set out to do, because one thing I really appreciated was the complexity of these Black characters, which you're totally right, we don't see that, you know. And you know what, I love like a Black popular mean girl, you know, like Dion from Clueless, Hilary Banks from The Fresh Prince. I think it's great because we don't always get to see that. And one thing I thought was interesting, again, we hear this kind of early on when Chiamaka's talking about how, you know, her sort of techniques for rising to the top, and she talks about the relationships that she has with, and everyone else in this school is white, you know, so she's having relationships with white boys, and she talks about it sort of using them as social currency. But what I thought was interesting about this is she does make reference to at least one of these relationships where she was clearly just, you know, a kind of fetish or an experiment. And yeah, I was just wondering if you could kind of talk to that conflict between her realizing, okay, I can get something from them, but also maybe what that feels like to know, well, I'm actually being fetishized and being exoticized because I'm, you know, this Black woman.
I think with a lot of Black people and people of color in general, a lot of relationships and friendships often feel like a transaction, usually on the oppressor's side. For example, they have a Black friend, they can like look kind of progressive, or they can ask questions to their Black friend and kind of use them as a guinea pig almost. So I wanted to kind of explore that transactional relationship, and also how someone that's very aware of that kind of manipulates that and uses it for her advantage, because she's aware that there's like other things at play here, especially with like white boys and white men. And so because she wants to get ahead, she just kind of uses it to her advantage. So I really wanted to show someone that is really self-aware and aware of kind of her positionality in the world and in the school, and uses it for like her own personal gain.
Yeah, and I think again that makes her very real and very human, because I think you do have to have that level of awareness when you are marginalized, and when, you know, you realize that there are people who don't have such good intentions towards you, and you've got to be real and act however you kind of have to act to survive. So yeah, that's something I also really appreciate about the character. Yeah, and so we also have Devon. I always, in my head, I was reading it as Devon, but I don't know. Were you writing it as Devon or Devon?
You got it right, yeah.
Yeah, okay, because I don't know why I thought that. Maybe just because it sounds less like the place, you know. So we also have Devon, who's another great character, and you know, he's also kind of struggling with relationships, but maybe in a slightly different sense at the beginning. And through Devon, pretty early on, you explore queerness, and I'm wondering why it was important for you to represent the intersections of Blackness and queerness in this narrative.
So like the book is like overall kind of an allegory for like institutional racism. And so I felt like a lot of narratives and a lot of like kind of just discussions around like the Black power movements and like just progressive movements in general, I often leave out the people that kind of pioneered these movements, who are Black queer people. And so I just felt like it was right to recenter Black queer people. And also I'm a Black queer person. So I just wanted to just center people I care about in these stories.
Yeah, because I think when you're not seeing that, it's quite, it can be quite, have you found that challenging when you're consuming these stories and, you know, you're not kind of seeing yourself? Yeah,
I always feel like you don't exist when you don't like see yourself in like in media, because so much media focuses, if it's going to focus on queerness, it usually has like a cis white person like kind of having that experience, but then if it's talking about Blackness, it might not have a Black person that's queer, it's just like a cis het Black person. So I really wanted to kind of recenter the people that I wanted this story to be for.
Yeah, and I think again, you did that in a way that I think, you know, it wasn't like his Blackness and his queerness, they weren't separate aspects of his identity. It was very clear from his experiences and from his fears and from his interactions how that did intersect. And I think that does really go to show what happens when people write about the characters that reflect their own, you know, identities, rather than people trying to just imagine, oh, you know, it doesn't come off as, you know, nearly as authentic. There was one thing that Devon said that kind of struck a chord with me. He said, dreaming can be dangerous. It's hard to dream in a neighborhood like ours, because although Devon goes to this very privileged school, he himself is not actually, you know, he's from the wrong side of the tracks, you'd say, and he's queer as well. And he says, it hurts to dream, but I dream regardless. And I just thought that was such a beautiful and hopeful message. And it just kind of made me think about the way that dreaming can be an escape for marginalized people, for Black queer people, but it can also be very fearful as well. And I just thought it was interesting how you work that message in subtly. I'm just wondering if you could kind of speak to that dichotomy a bit.
Yeah, I feel like dreaming is kind of a big theme in the book in general, and especially with Devon. I come from like a working class background, and people in my area in London often don't go to university, or are told that they can't really amount to much by like white teachers. Like one of my teachers told me not to even, bother with a good degree. And it's really like kind of the reality. And because you're kind of putting in a situation where you haven't really got the resources to level up in the same way as people that are from a different socioeconomic background. And also like a lot of institutional bias like affects the way you just move in general. It's just really, really painful to constantly put your like dreams out there and just know that there's something else that's at play that is kind of stopping that from happening. And so it's almost like you're trying to overcome something that's so much bigger than you, and it's not your fault, but at the same time, you really want to amount to something, and it just feels kind of hopeless sometimes.
Yeah, and I do think that, I mean, obviously, but don't want to give spoilers because I really do want people to run and get this book if they haven't read it already. Or wait for the Netflix series because I'm sure it's gonna have to come out. It's gonna be so watchable. But I do think you're right. The dreaming is definitely it definitely really plays a big role here, and I think ultimately there is kind of a message of hope, even though they're in the sunken place, even though they're surrounded by white people who aren't always what they seem. And I think for me, going into reading this book, I didn't realize it was going to be as sinister as it was. I loved that, but it kind of took me aback a bit. And just you created this very claustrophobic feeling of like not being able to trust anyone. And I could definitely relate to that when we were talking along kind of race lines and not being able to trust white people. But I was just imagining if I was reading this as a white person and maybe thinking, surely we all can't be that bad, But obviously it's difficult to imagine not having had that experience. But yeah, that kind of message that you were in that environment you were creating, that they couldn't trust any of these white people and there was always another side. Yeah, I'm just wondering if you always kind of wanted to go in portraying that as so hard as you did and so kind of blatant as you did in the book.
Yes, actually at first I think I wrote a lot more sanitized version of the book because I was writing it in my first year of university, and I was like experiencing a lot of new things for the first time. Like for example, where I come from in London, in my high school, it was mostly just Black and brown people. White people were the minority, and so I didn't really have opportunities to really be confronted with that like head on. It was usually the teachers or just the idea of the system in play somewhere. And then when I came to Scotland for university, it was completely different. And so for the first time, I was having to kind of code switch and having to really like experience things that I've only heard of on Twitter, but had never really experienced in real life, like people touching your hair, people being really, really awful. So at first when I was writing it, I was kind of like trying to kind of work through that. And then as I was like learning more, reading more about like the world and just like experiencing things as well, I realized I had to be like kind of, I'm not sure what the word would be, but I have to be more kind of harsh on what the reality is, because the reality is harsh. So yeah, I was really constantly shocked while I was at university because it was just the first time experiencing this, and I couldn't imagine what it's like for like a Black or brown person growing up and coming of age in this environment. I think it would have broken me personally. So
well, as someone who was born and raised and still living in Aberdeen, yeah, I do have some thoughts on that subject, but that must have been a very steep learning curve, I guess. These are really difficult lessons that nobody really wants to to have to learn, especially when you realize that everyone around you isn't having to kind of learn these lessons. So while you were writing this, if you were writing at the beginning, was it actually helping you process some of these feelings?
Yeah, like I get a lot of people telling me that the character Jamie is really evil, and yeah, that's not really a spoiler. People just don't like him from the first page when he comes. So but yeah, I was just kind of processing the interactions I was having with all sorts of white people. I wanted to kind of go into like just the way different like white people interact with you. I wanted to go into like feminism and white tears that come from white women. I wanted to go into kind of the violence I've experienced from like white queer people, violence experienced from white cis het males or men. So yeah, I really wanted to just show how it all looks different, but it's as insidious. And yeah, it helped me process a lot of interactions I had in real life, and I hope it helps other people too.
Yeah, it's so amazing that, I mean, just on the face of it, as I said, you know, I just read this in such a short amount of time. It's just a great read, but there's so many layers to it. And also to just hear how much of your own experience and everything that was going on with you that you actually put into this. I think that's just, yeah, it just makes it, I think, really quite special. And I think you can, you know, from the dedication and just all these really subtle things that are going on with the characters, you know, as a Black queer person reading that, you really do. So yeah, from a very personal note, I just really want to thank you for doing such a lovely job on that. I think it's really refreshing to read that and to hear these voices being represented. And I know you said you found that you felt, you know, you weren't seeing yourself represented necessarily in media. Were there places or books or films or things where you did and that kind of inspired you to be like, oh wow, I can create my own world and do that? Was it, who was that kind of inspiration for you?
Definitely people like Malcolm X and like James Baldwin, and I loved like Dear White People because there was so much like representation of different Black people. So yeah, there was places where I eventually found like kind of my own thoughts and like feelings, but also my own identities like represented eventually, but I didn't really grow up with that. It was more so when I was already like 18, 19 that I was like seeing all of this.
Yeah, and do you think there's something to be said about the difference between kind of reaching an age where you realize that's missing and then you kind of have to look for it rather than it's just sort of there? How's that kind of as an experience?
I think that when you've reached the age where you like are able to understand that you need it and you're looking for it, it's almost like too late. I mean, it's never too late to have representation, but like I think the damage has already been done and you have to kind of like unlearn a lot of things at that point and kind of understand that it's not like you being erased isn't because you're not important. I think that often when we haven't got main characters as people we see ourselves in, it like makes us think we shouldn't be main characters, even in our own lives, which can be kind of damaging. So I think not having that available readily can make that really, really difficult and can be extremely damaging.
Yeah, for sure. And there's so much, it's such a simple thing to be able to turn on the TV and see someone that looks like you, that isn't in a, you know, that isn't being made fun of, or isn't the sassy best friend with just like a one-liner and no history or any other dimension. And it's something I hope that it is getting better, but I'm, you know, there's always going to be those kind of challenges, you know. And you said there, you know, how much you have put into these characters that were parts of you, but they're obviously they're their own people almost, and they're so well realized. I'm wondering did you kind of come up with the characters first and then there was a story around them, or how did that kind of work as far as world building and character development?
I think they happened at the same time. Like I remember just thinking, how weird would it be if like I mixed Gossip Girl with Get Out? Because I just finished watching Gossip Girl for the first time, and I was like, that'd be really, really cool if I could do that. And then I just kept on thinking, what sorts of people would be in that environment? And it kind of just was coming along together at the same time as I was like thinking about the idea and expanding on it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I like when I'm reading a book and you learn a lot about the character, and I think, I wonder why the author decided that, you know, why was Devon this great piano player, and why was Chiamaka's dad from Italy, of all places? Like, did it just come to you quite clearly, or were there very kind of, you're like, no, I'm going to put this in because it's specific to this character for a reason that I know?
Yeah, like some of the things are random, but a lot of them are kind of like meant to be Easter eggs for like things in history, or just things about like history about Blackness and like whiteness that I've read about, and discussions I wanted to have as well. So yeah, because like in the book, it's like kind of mixing Britishisms and Americanisms together. I also wanted to like reference like European racism in general. And I just really wanted to have Easter eggs of history for people that have like read about it or wanted to learn more about this type of things.
I love this idea of Easter egg, and to be honest, on my first read, I'm maybe not sure that just makes me want to kind of like go back to it and look over it again, because there's so many twists. You know, I think if you go back to the beginning, which I did, you know, before coming up with my questions, and even just reading the first page, I was just like, it was like a Greek tragedy, you know, when you know what's going to happen and all the characters are just sort of ignorant. How did you come up with all these twists and turns?
I kind of think to myself like what the most messed up thing that could happen would be, and then I try my hardest to execute it.
Yeah, well, no, I think you definitely succeeded, because, you know, you know that something is going to happen and it's building up, but yeah, the level of kind of sinister did take me by surprise, but I did love that. I'm just looking at the time, we're at 8 o'clock, so we do have a lot more time to chat, but I just want to let the audience know, all you lovely people watching, that there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So if you have any questions for Faridah, excuse me, in 15 minutes, I'll have a wee look at them, and then we can just leave the next 15 minutes over to a Q&A, because I'm sure you've got so many questions, especially if you've read the book. But remember, please, no, no spoilers. I'm just wondering how it kind of feels for you, because I guess you were living maybe kind of an ordinary life, you know, going to uni and studying your degree, and then all of a sudden this thing that you're doing that you know, you said you were writing it for you, it was helping you process some difficult feelings and emotions, and then it becomes a bestseller. What was that like, to go from this thing here to kind of up there? How was that change for you?
It was very weird because I'm quite a private person, so I like didn't tell anyone in real life apart from my mom and my sisters, and so a lot of my friends found out just from reading the news, and so it was very strange because it kind of was like a secret for me for a long time, and something I celebrated quietly and was doing kind of on the side while going to uni, and then yeah, it just kind of changed so like instantly.
Do you feel like it affected your own personal process of writing?
I had already finished writing at that point because I got my UK book deal in 2018. So it had been a long time while I was like editing it and stuff. And yeah, so by the time I'd already like written it, it really like didn't affect like the writing process because like the announcement for the US deal happened so like long after.
I'm assuming you are, I hope you are, but I've heard that you are going to be, you know, writing another book. So I'm wondering how you're feeling, kind of what the difference is now that you, okay, I'm going to start writing now, but I'm now writing as a best-selling author, not, you know, an undergrad at, you know, a university in Scotland somewhere. How does that feel for you, and kind of going into writing your future book and hopefully many more after that?
it's very, very like difficult because there's this kind of phenomenon called sophomore book syndrome, where people struggle no matter what, like to write a second book. So I'm kind of experiencing that right now. But like I'm just, because most of the writing happens when you're editing, I'm just hoping that like it becomes better when I edit.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's going to be brilliant, and I'm very very much looking forward to reading that. Can you give us any hints what might be involved?
It's kind of like
write it first.
Ace of Spades is more like Gossip Girl, but sinister. This is kind of Mean Girls but sinister.
Oh, okay, that does sound really interesting. Yeah. Are you worried at all about maybe being, I mean, personally, I do think that it's very easy for Black people and people of color to be sort of pigeonholed as soon as you kind of do one sort of thing, or you become the expert on race or race in private schools or whatever. Do you have any concerns about maybe that happening?
I think it's always like a concern, like you see it happen to some people, even if their only book on race is like just one book or like two books. But I, like with Ace of Spades, I try to write like other stuff other than just race going on. Like I try to make it also like a compelling drama and stuff. So I hope to be like recognized more for like just like really twisted dramas that feature Black people, not necessarily about like the trauma part, just like them in sinister situations going forward.
Yeah, and I think again, you kind of did strike that balance quite well. It wasn't obviously, this is a book about institutionalized racism, but it is also a book about young queer love and fitting in and coming of age and being at that age where you're almost a fully grown adult, but you're not really, and all these kind of expectations. So it's really great, again, as a Black queer person, to read that and kind of have that well-rounded narrative, and it's not just this is a book about race. One thing that I do find though is that sometimes when Black people and people of color are maybe criticized for talking about race, and it's sort of like, well, we'd like to not talk about it, but we didn't invent it, and it's it's kind of a big deal, and it's there to be talked about. So I guess, yeah, maybe I'm really excited to see where you can take your Black characters in the future. What would be, do you have an idea of, when talking of dreaming, of a Black character that you have never seen before that you would like to see, that you kind of think is quite outside of the white imagination and hasn't been given screen time or hasn't been written on the page?
I think definitely a Black queer Muslim, because I mean, I'm Muslim as well, and so that would be amazing. My second book, that's like the main character, and so I kind of think of the things I want to see and I kind of try and make them happen. So that would definitely be amazing for me. I actually finished watching Sex Education, the recent season, and the character Cal is non-binary, and I found out that the actor is also non-binary and is also a Muslim as well. And so it's kind of already happening, and I'm really happy just seeing how far we've come in media.
Yeah, that I'm glad you didn't go into any spoilers because I'm only on episode 4. But yeah, I think that it's amazing that in 2021 there are still so many, they're not characters, I mean, they're real people that actually do exist. It's not like they're being made up, it's just being that they're, they're represented, and we're still kind of having these kind of discussions. I've got a couple of questions in the chat, which if you're okay to go to, or maybe this one is from Elisa. You've mentioned how James Baldwin and Malcolm X influenced you personally. And as I was reading the book, I noticed a few mentions of them, especially when it came to the titles of each part. The Fire Next Time and The Ballot or the Bullet, are the titles Easter eggs like the one you mentioned? Can you speak about it a little? And P.S. just finished the book an hour ago. It was really good. Thanks, Elisa.
Thank you. Yeah, the subtitles, like the chapter titles, are definitely Easter eggs as well. The Fire Next Time is like a very, very like famous kind of book of essays by James Baldwin, and Ballot of the Bullet is like a famous speech by Malcolm X. And so I really wanted to give kind of young adults the tools to like understand racism without kind of being preachy. And so the Easter eggs allow for them to kind of be like, oh, what's that? And like type it into Google and discover more, because I kind of started my journey of unlearning stuff through reading Malcolm X's autobiography. And I don't know how I found it. I just one day went to Waterstones and it was there. And I just wanted to kind of point people in the right direction, or in a direction that might help them process things better or unlearn things or start unlearning. And yeah, the Easter eggs are just there to basically either kind of make people pick up on like certain themes that are coming up, or help people understand some context, or just give people some tools for learning more about like racism and the things I'm discussing in the story.
Yeah, I think that is such a great way to do that as well, because it's so subtle, you know, and it's there if people want to kind of delve further. Have you heard from anyone who's maybe, I don't know if there was something that they hadn't really thought about or heard about in the book, and they've maybe got in touch to say that, you know, that's maybe an Easter egg that they've picked up on? Have you had any sort of feedback like that?
Yeah, I get messages like every single day from people, like a lot of like Black teenagers reach out, and like POC in general reach out to me, and they're just like so happy to like have these conversations and so happy to be represented. But also a lot of people are kind of realizing what they're going through and having it articulated in a way that they can now understand and like put meaning to and process. It's really, really like lovely to me. And yeah, I just get messages every single day.
That must be so affirming. Yeah. And did you imagine that this would ever be a thing? You know, there would be people kind of thanking you and saying how meaningful your work was to them. You'd never thought that was.
When I was writing it, I didn't even think it would be published, because I just felt like it was too much of publishing. Because publishing is often, I mean, there's statistics that come out every year about how much it's lacking diversity. And when it does have diversity, often it's maybe like palatable versions of it. And I was writing a story that was very like unpalatable, I guess. So I wasn't expecting it to even be like picked up by a publisher, because I assume that no one would want a story like that. So I'm just happy it's kind of in the world now.
Yeah, and I'm thankful to, as I'm sure everyone else listening and all those people that get in touch with you. Katya has a question about how long did it take for you to build the characters?
I feel like it took the amount of time that like I was writing it throughout. So like I kept on learning new things about them as I was writing. So like with Chiamaka, I didn't really understand her at first, because I felt like it's very difficult because she has a lot of the same insecurities I had when I was younger. And so I was almost working through them with her. And at the end, I realized that she was she was in a lot of pain, and so was I. And so I got to know them basically throughout the course of writing the story, and even just like while editing and stuff. So it took like 2 years in total, but literally, I think that I never will know them fully. So yeah, I always like think of something, I'm like, oh, maybe that's why the character did that. It's like kind of subconscious sometimes, like you just kind of like learning things that your brain has created. It's really weird. So yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it does sound like it's happening on a subconscious level, is it? And you know, as if these characters are, you know, they are part of you, but they're also their own, and they're in charge, and they're letting you know. And that must be a really interesting and revealing process, you know, especially if you're saying it's something that you're working with these characters. When did you discover that's what was happening? I'm wondering if you kind of went in at the beginning and just thought, oh, I've made up this character, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, she knows a lot. What's she trying to teach me today?
I think I realized it was happening quite early on, but specifically with Chiamaka, I realized it was happening when I saw her kind of pining after these white boys. And I was like, I don't feel like she actually likes these boys. There's something else going on here. And then she was introduced to this girl character and she was treating her differently. And I was like, I think Chiamaka is queer. And it's just presenting differently than it does with Devon. And I then like started to like, you know, think deeply about what that meant and like realize that there was like other things happening, and the reason why she was experiencing her queerness differently was because of her upbringing and also her womanhood. A lot of girls that are queer go through, you know, compulsory heteronormativity, and so they don't even realize they're queer sometimes because of the world constantly kind of sending these messages about like what is like acceptable. So yeah, just as soon as I realized that that was what's happening, I realized I had to just kind of go with the flow and like let the characters do what they want, because clearly there was something else going on that I couldn't control as I was writing.
That's wonderful. And I think that's a really great tip if there's any aspiring writers or people who do write who are watching just now. Because I think sometimes as writers, we do try and have control. There's an idea, oh, there's the story, this is what happens, or there's this narrative. But I think, yeah, you're totally right. When you allow yourself to let that go, so wonderful things can happen. So that's pretty good advice. I would encourage everyone to take that on board. We've got another question for you here. I would love to hear if you had multiple ideas for the book, and if so, how you narrowed them down. So, you know, if it was clear for you from the start of the general idea you want to write. Oh, and this person is a new writer, so maybe some advice for them as well. Do you, as a new writer, do you have a writing process already, and would you be happy to share it? Great question, thank you.
So the first question was about like, sorry, I'm kind of forgetting some parts of it.
If there, did you have many ideas?
Oh yeah.
About the book? And if so, how did you narrow that down?
Because I outlined quite heavily, so I kind of like plot the book beforehand. It kind of was always the same story from the beginning. Like my outline was like I don't know, more than 10,000 words. So I already have the skeleton of the structure of the story beforehand. So I kind of always advise people to outline, but it doesn't help everyone or work for everyone, because some people like to discover the story as they write, but I like to discover the characters more, and like I like to have a plot in place so that I kind of know where I'm going. And in terms of like advice for new writers, I kind of think that people should just like kind of get out of their own heads and like just write a story, because I think for a long time I couldn't even finish a story. I've been writing since I was like really young, and I was just so like intimidated by the idea of finishing a story that I just would start new stories over and over again. But I think finishing one story really helps your mind to know that you are capable of finishing a story. And so it helps with like writing another story that's better each time.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And while you were writing, were you sharing your writing with anyone, or were you a member of any kind of writing collectives or groups or anything like that?
So when I was writing my first like few books that were really awful, I would send them to friends. And you should probably never send your books to friends, because they won't give you the advice you need. You need someone that's going to be either tougher or understands like the way stories are told. And so I joined Twitter, like writing Twitter, and I kind of made friends with the people in the community, and I found people there that like would critique my work for me, and I would critique their work as well. They're called critique partners or beta readers. And they help me with things like grammar even, because I'm dyslexic, so I struggle with processing, and I struggle with grammar and writing and stuff like that. So even they were helping with like saying, oh, this the punctuation here is weird, it's not really how books are written, and I would be like, thank you, and implement it in all my other writing. So I really recommend like finding a group of writers that like can give you honest advice, and finding people that also are compatible with your kind of writing, because people that write fantasy, for example, might not like the book you're writing that might be like contemporary. So trying to find people that are like-minded and also need help as well can really help.
Thank you. I think that's some very good advice. Yeah, definitely. So good luck if anyone's writing the next New York Times bestseller in the audience. We've got another question for you here. Since your book addresses institutional racism, do you think there's a way to help Black and brown people going through similar uni experiences to fight or be safe from such experiences?
I think because it's such a big systemic issue, I think until it's like addressed in that level, it probably will never stop. But in the small ways of like helping people, I think if there was more communities set up that were safe spaces, it really helps. Like when I was at university, I was part of societies that I felt were really comforting. Like I was part of the BAME Forum, and I was part of ACS, the African Caribbean Society. And while not all the societies are perfect, safe spaces for everyone, that can be like a really good step. I also feel like teachers can make places, like professors can make places safer for POC. I felt like some professors really, really cared about that and making the work environment safe for everyone. And I started to enjoy my lessons more when I had professors like that, and I could choose to be in their classes because I knew that they actually cared about the well-being of minoritized people. But then some professors don't ever think about that. So I think if like universities could really encourage like professors to care about people that are marginalized, that would be really, really helpful. Like, you know, just implementing stuff like, I don't know, like some of my professors would put like surveys at the beginning of a class where you can anonymously fill stuff out, or you could also talk about like your pronouns and things that trigger you in class discussions. So yeah, I just think that when you have people that genuinely care about making a safe environment for students, things improve. And I also just think a lot of white people need to confront their biases, because, you know, I've experienced the worst things at like student events. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that you're saying about confronting biases, and, you know, going back to your book where kind of, no, there's everyone, okay, it is a bit extreme in the book, but, you know, all the white people in it they're guilty of perpetuating some form of racism. And I do think that is difficult for people to confront in a nuanced way, because people can become immediately very defensive, or, you know, well, actually I'm liberal, I'm a leftist, and it becomes very difficult to have these honest conversations where we can actually move forward. I don't know if personally I kind of have the energy as I've got older to kind of have these conversations one-to-one anymore for my own mental health. I kind of tend to come back from that a little bit. Do you have any advice for any Black or students of color who are maybe going away from home for the first time, going to university in a place that could be majority white?
Try and find like community. It's very difficult, especially for me who I don't drink, and so it was just doubly hard because I think a lot of people make friends in party situations and stuff, and I don't drink, so I'm just always in my room. So I had to kind of go and find the spaces where I might find people that were like me, that maybe didn't drink, or people that were from my similar background. And also, I don't know, it's very difficult because I think it just takes time to adjust to any environment, no matter what, even if you do find a community. So I just think like give yourself time and be kind to yourself about the way of processing that.
I think that's a really great advice for many things. Kind of first, compassion with yourself and be kind to yourself. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know it's not kind of easy to rehash these kind of a Black trauma. And as a Black person myself, you know, I'm sort of like, you know, I don't want to like be kind of like digging into these things, but obviously so much of it is in the book, and it is part of your story. Do you feel like there is a pressure as a young Black queer person, as a Black Muslim, to kind of, you know, to talk about these experiences now that you have this platform, and kind of like, how's that to navigate if there is that pressure?
I don't really feel the pressure, because I kind of like don't think of people that are like not my target audience. I just talk about the things I enjoy, and that brings me joy, and I like focus on that. Like you said, I've grown to the point where I don't speak about racism or teach people lessons. If they learn something from anything I do, that's like cool for them. But generally, I do things for my own benefit, or for the benefit of people I care about and groups I care about. And so I'm always thinking of people that are minoritized in certain ways and stuff. So yeah, I think I'm very focused on that, rather than like the pressure of society or the pressure of like the white gaze.
That's so great to hear. And, you know, I don't think you would have been able to write a book like this and kind of keep your sanity and like talk about it and to get to publishing if you weren't coming from that perspective. And again, I think that's brilliant advice for all writers, for all creatives, but I think especially for Black people and people of color. We have to put ourselves first. We have to put our stories first. And you know what you said in the first instance, you were writing this for you. And I just think that like people should really listen to that and go away with that, especially if they're writing. Because yeah, at the end of the day, if you're writing it for someone else, then what are you going to get from that, you know? So thank you for all that. This is a great question, because I'd like to take some notes as well. Do you have any recommendations of Black queer books? And this person says, mine is Yesterday in History by Kosoko Jackson. So that's, take that one down, audience. So yeah, do you have any Black queer book recs?
Yeah, I really recommend anything by Akweke Emezi. They are a trans Nigerian writer, and they're just phenomenal at everything they do. I read their book, Dear Cynthia, recently, which is like a memoir kind of about like their life and their experience with like identity and publishing and everything, and they are really, really honest. I also read that book, The Death of Vivek Oji, which is about a queer Nigerian, and it's just amazing. I also recommend The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta. He's just like phenomenal writer, and he's also in Scotland. He's in Glasgow, I believe. And yeah, he writes novels in verse, and so they're kind of like poetry, but like so accessible, and like it's like a narrative. So each poem follows like a narrative structure, and they're just so well written, those like books. So I recommend those authors.
Exactly my recommendation. Exactly. I'm obsessed with Akweke Emezi, and Dina too. I'm also one of the programmers at the Scottish BAME Writers Network. So yeah, love Dean. So yeah, please check those out, folks, because they're really, really great reads. We've still got some time, and we've still got some questions, so we'll keep going. How do you, this is from Natasha, how do you keep yourself inspired during the writing process, and if you feel your ideas for the story don't flow? You know, like, so some writers might go out, like recommend going out for a walk. Do you have a ritual which you do before you write? So I guess that's about writer's block, keeping motivated, and any rituals that you do to get you into that writing space.
I think again, community. I like made really, really good friends during like publishing, and so if I'm struggling to write, I'll just call my friend Adiba. She's a writer as well. And we just have like a phone conversation about literally everything that is bothering me about the story. And she helps me work through it. And a lot of people do that. They just call up their friends and are like, have this fictional problem that I can't solve, and their friends kind of make some suggestions and it can help inspire stuff. Some authors take a shower. Some people like to write in different locations to where they like sleep or relax, so they can kind of associate those spaces with writing, and then the other spaces with relaxation, which has been difficult during the pandemic. So like, I guess if you have another corner in your house, I saw one writer works in their cupboard, which is very funny. So yeah, any place that's kind of different from where you relax can be helpful.
Yeah, it's interesting how you brought up again that need for community and sort of sharing with others, because I think people think of writing as a very solitary pursuit and it's something you do alone. But I'm sure you've realized, since you have a published book, how there's a whole team and you know the difference that editors make. But even before that stage, even if you're just reading someone else's work, you know that, like, you know, you being inspired by Malcolm X, in my mind, that's you carrying on a conversation that he started decades ago, you know. So I think that's a really interesting thing, that you're never writing by yourself, and if you think you are, you're probably not doing a good job. Probably just writing in an echo chamber. We've got another question here. Do the Easter eggs include comparing Black lives and experiences in England and Scotland?
Yeah, I felt like so like Ace of Spades, the setting is meant to be very like ambiguous, because I wanted it to be unclear where this was taking place. Like an American reader will read it and like feel like this can't be America because of certain like setups. For example, how close the school is to like the towns, whereas that's kind of like an experience you'd find in England and Scotland, where, you know, you can literally be in an area and cross like socioeconomic like neighborhoods that are so different. And like I was just thinking of like Grenfell Tower, and how like that literally happened in like one of the richest areas in Europe. And there were so many working class Black and brown people that unfortunately died, you know, in that fire because of neglect from the government. And I really wanted to kind of show issues that occur in our country, but also kind of have it be in that like classic American teen drama style that you see in Pretty Little Liars and Gossip Girl. So yeah, definitely that's one of the Easter eggs.
I think it works really well, because you are kind of a bit like, oh, what, they're using maybe a certain word here, then a different word there. And that did kind of remind me a little bit about, you know, sex education. Kind of when you're watching it, you're like, what decade is this in? Like, what continent is it? It's very, but it's in its own world. And I think it works really well, and it kind of adds to this, you know, it's somewhere else, but it could be next door, you know, and like, you know, the conspiracy that's going on at this school, it really is very sinister, and you know, really hope nothing like that would ever take place. But when you think about it, you're like, well, you know, and that I thought was brilliant, because you created this world, and you thought, well, it would be, as you say, you're coming up with the most sort of dramatic and scary idea, and it's like saying what if, and that is scary, because a lot of the time the what if isn't that far off from what's happening now. You know, it's just a different way of envisioning it.
A lot of the things that take place in the book are actually like things that have taken place or are currently taking place in the real world that a lot of us just don't realize. Like a lot of events in like dystopian novels, for example, are things that have happened to Black and brown people in history. So it's just kind of like things that seem so like wild that you can't even imagine happening, and it just seems extreme, are actually the experiences of people of color all over the world because of like white supremacy. So I feel like I really want people to kind of take that away from the book. While it's an allegory, it's also very real.
And I think that's a wonderful note to end on there, that what you want people to take away is it's allegorical, but this is happening. You know, maybe not all of these instances at once in this particular building, in this place that we don't know where it is. Yeah, so thank you very much, Faridah. That hour just flew by. I hope you've enjoyed speaking to me. I've had a lovely time chatting to you. And thank you everyone for coming along. Thanks for your questions. The BAME forum that Faridah mentioned, thank you to you guys, because this event has actually been supported by them. Leslie, thank you. I feel like I'm doing an Oscar speech, but there's so many people to thank. Thanks, Leslie, as well. And for the BSL interpretation, Gillian for doing those live captions, and of course the AV team. And please, if you haven't already got this book, we haven't spoiled it, so come on, get to your local bookshop. And yeah, thanks everyone. And yeah, Faridah, really looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you.
And just continue to enjoy your success of such a wonderful book.